Good morning. I sure do know. It is Jeff Gudman, who is running for state treasurer. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning.
Good morning. Tell us, have you run before? Have I talked to you before?
Yes, I was the candidate for state treasurer in 2016 and came very, very close to winning that election.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some good news about that.
Oh, okay. Well,
in
would you like to tell us?
2016, I lost by 42,000 votes. Chris Telfer, former state senator from Bend and now serving on the Lottery Commission, ran as the independent party candidate.
Mm-hmm.
She received 175,000 votes.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I lost by 42,000. In 2020, she is 100% endorsing me.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm very pleased with that.
Yeah. So tell us about your background and why you want to run for treasurer.
You bet. I am second generation of Oregonian and have a degree in economics, an MBA from the Wharton School, and have worked in the financial field as a analyst, controller, treasurer, investor all of my life.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, I had 8 years of service on the city council in Lake Oswego, where my focus was on the financial issues of the city, informing and educating the public, and on infrastructure. And that's the kind of focus I think needs to be serving in the treasurer's office, where you have someone on a statewide level who's always going to be asking, if we do this, what don't we do?
Mm-hmm.
Or what's the status of what's going on? As an example of that, we've been reading about the terrible problems with people trying to get their unemployment payments. And the Employment Division got a federal grant and to upgrade their computer systems 8 years ago, and it's still not scheduled to be done for another 5 or 6 years. That's not a good response. I mean, somebody should have been on top of that. You don't have IT upgrade projects that take 15 years to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the treasurer should have been on top of that as well as others, but the treasurer in particular.
Mm-hmm. So you obviously have a financial background and a background in organization. Well, as you said, infrastructure.
Yes.
And I mentioned to you that when we were talking before we went on the air that the Ways and Means, Senator Betsy Johnson is co-chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and she talks a lot about the budget and what her role is in the budget. How does that differ from the treasurer, and how do those two committees and groups work together?
You bet. It's a great question. The legislature has the final say, and Betsy Johnson, as the chair or co-chair in her service, she and her colleagues determine what the final shape of the budget is. But having said that, the treasurer has overall responsibility for, and I'm going a little wonky here, but I think that's what you want in a treasurer, is somebody who's wonky financially. The treasurer has the responsibility for the assets, those things that we own, and the liabilities, those dollars that we owe. And they need to be presenting a voice as a part of that process,
Mm-hmm.
being at the table, if you will, saying, here's what I think, here's why I think what we should do. Governor, legislature, you have the final say, but here's my judgment.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is important. I think it's, again, you and I, we have a conversation to our listeners. We have a conversation before we go on the air, and then I generally regurgitate part of that conversation. I do think it's important in any issue that we're facing in our lives to get a full, well-rounded perspective, whether you agree with the opinion that is provided or not. It is important to listen to maybe people that don't agree with you, or, people that are experts in their field, to give you information that you can then make an informed decision from.
That's exactly right, and that is one of my criticisms of our current treasurer, is that, take, for example, the impact of coronavirus, not only the terrible impact it's having on individuals throughout the state, whether they have the sickness, they know somebody who was sick, they're unemployed, know someone who's been unemployed, or all that impact, but there's the huge impact on the state budget.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of ways that you can address that, and it's going to have to be addressed. I expect the treasurer to be out front saying, here's my thinking, to the governor, to the legislature, to the people of the state, saying, here's what I think we should do to address this. Here's why I think it. I can change my mind as the facts change, but express what your thinking is. And he is not doing that because he has a desire to be governor of the state. And because he wants to be governor, he doesn't express his opinions on issues which might irritate people.
Sure. Let's see. So I'm curious, what is your opinion about the budgeting? I know for a long time, the special session that happened at the end of June was supposed to be focused on the budget. And I believe there is another special session going to be called to discuss it. But if you were in that role as treasurer, what is your opinion of that? What do you think? I mean, I know that's a very big, ominous question because you would have to look at the details and all that. But I'm just curious what your general perspective is about the budget and what's going to happen.
You bet. You're right with not having the devil is in the details,
sure,
or the angels are in the details, whichever way you wish to look at that, and you have to go through that carefully. But you start off with a broad-based approach. For example, the last thing that I ever want to have to do is to say we're going to raise taxes to cover a shortfall. I mean, raising taxes is always an option, but it's not an item that I want to look at as the first choice. Let's give a couple examples where there was money for the state which could have been available, but it wasn't addressed because our treasurer wasn't speaking up. A few years ago, there was the audit which came out on looking at the purchasing processes of the state, and it's identified in it that the state could save tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars by improving the purchasing processes that we have. We ought to clean up what we're doing before we start doing something else.
Right.
And those monies could have been taken as an example, because that's an example of what I call, quote, found money, unquote. The employees of the state, the employees of our cities and counties, they want to do a good job. And if somebody says, here's a way of making it better, you want to do it. And that money could have gone toward, as an example, into the savings bank, either of the two rainy day funds that the state has, or it could have gone to pay down the unfunded PERS liability, all of which frees up money for what we're going through right now. Another example of that, and again, this is going a little wonky, back in 2017, when the federal government passed the changes in the tax law, according to the state revenue office projection, over the course of a decade, that was going to bring in up to another $1 billion a year. $1 billion over the course of a decade. That money could have gone toward, again, the rainy day funds, because it's what I call found money.
Right.
That's the kind of approach you want to have someone in the treasurer's office doing when these situations develop, when something comes up, saying, oh, we can use this, we can save it, we can put it in our reserves, we can pay down some of those liabilities, like the PERS liability, so it helps us going forward. That's the first thing that you want to do. I disagree with what I have read about the governors sort of saying to all of the administrative heads of the different departments of the state, saying, I want you to bring me a 17% cut. Her approach, the general approach, can work, but different departments have different abilities to reduce respond to that kind of request. If you're a department with 4,000 people and you're a department with 40 people, taking 17% out is a much different situation. And I would have wanted to have gone through on a department-by-department basis in giving that kind of direction. And that's the kind of recommendations I would have been making when I was serving as treasurer.
Can you talk about some of your priorities in your candidacy? Because I think I'm on your website and I'm looking at them, and I think there's some really important ones. And I appreciate you bringing up PERS. I know that is one of the things you actually note. His website is Jeff Gudman. It's spelled GUDMAN.org. You can get lots of information on there. What are some of those platform priorities for you?
You bet. You've looked at my website. Which of the ones would you like me to
All of them?
expound on?
All of them. Well, I appreciate that you have frugality on here. I think that's how you say it. I like to call it fiscal responsibility.
Yes.
But and you've kind of talked a little bit about it, but you gave an example when you were on the Lake Oswego City Council. You were able to fund your projects without raising taxes.
Yes. It's something I'm particularly pleased with, along with my colleagues, although I was the lead on it, but it takes a team to make things happen. And we had our Operations and Maintenance Center, which was an old aluminum building when the city bought it 40 years ago, and it was even older when we needed to replace it. It had a situation where when it rained, the roof leaked and you had buckets, and in the summer, because it was metal, it was incredibly hot inside.
Oh, sure.
And so it needed to be replaced, and it meant the employees of the city couldn't do the job for the city that they wanted to do. So I went through, working with the staff, and identified a variety of funding sources that could be done without having to go to the residents of our city and asking for more money. Sort of identified the probability of each of those funding sources and how much. Went through, added them all up to make sure if the estimated cost of replacing it was, $10, I wanted to make sure I had $12 worth of funding.
Sure.
Just in case, because you never know going forward.
Of course.
You find the unexpected giant boulder buried.
Right. We all know that.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And went through, and I was talking with my colleagues about it. It came up during council meetings. I was writing columns about it in the paper, where you're able to write a column once a month. And ultimately, it was adopted 7-0. And thanks to the project management, the combined team of the internal person and the external head of the project, brought the project in almost exactly on budget and on time. It went a little bit over budget because when they were doing some excavating, they found a couple of giant boulders. Mm-hmm. But it was that sort of approach. We replaced it without asking our residents for an additional dime. And the city is also now, again, because trying to use the approach of not asking for additional money, we're replacing our police station and city hall, again, without asking the residents for an additional dime, mm-hmm. but also making it clear by doing this, these are other things we're not going to do. Mm-hmm. Because the last time I checked, there's no money tree in the backyard for local and state government.
Sure.
I wish there was, but there isn't.
So how are you finding funding? Are you applying for grants? Are you raising money? Do you have donors, or are you looking for cost savings in other areas, or a combination?
Are we talking about the state or local?
Local.
Oh, well, the City Hall police station replacement is being done through the Urban Renewal District.
Oh, okay.
And there were other projects that were being considered, but after a lot of debate and discussion and compromise, we ultimately adopted the financing plan unanimously. Mm-hmm. And the council has the full spectrum of views. Mm-hmm. But we came together, and everybody gave a little bit, everybody got something, and that will ultimately close out the Urban Renewal District, but we'll now have a new police station, city hall, that will be there for the city for the next, hopefully, 70 years or so.
Right. That's great.
It is.
I'm going to take a quick break, and then I have some other stuff to talk to you about on your platform. Tillamook Motor Company is managing through the coronavirus crisis in a way that safeguards their workforce and their customers. It might be a little different, but if you need transportation, they'll make it happen. In fact, if you're interested in a new vehicle, the Built to Lend to Hand program gives you 6 months leeway before the initial payment. Tillamook Motor Company has always been connected to the community, now more than ever. Give them a call at 503-842-4475. That's 842-4475 for Tillamook Motor Company, a better place to do business. I'm speaking with Jeff Gudman this morning. He is candidate for state treasurer. I'm curious how you've had to adapt your campaign with I know locally here, we had a commissioner race, a primary commissioner race, which actually just wound up being the commissioner race because they won, I think, more than 50% or whatever the threshold is. Yes. So that doesn't have to go on to November. But I missed kind of the town hall sessions that we have, and I got to talk to everybody on the phone. But I always like going to their meet and greets because other people might have questions that I haven't thought about, and so I kind of missed out on that experience. I'm curious how this campaign has differed, obviously, from the one you did in 2016, and how you're adapting.
You bet. Well, certainly I'm not able to have the in-person meetings as much as I would like, or I think that the residents of the state would like. But I've been using a phrase that, if you'd asked me a year ago, I never would have imagined myself saying this. But my phrase every morning when I get up is, "I'm going Zooming."
Oh, goodness. I'm over Zoom. Here's what I do like about Zoom is that you can record it and you can post the video or the audio later. And so in that sense, it is kind of nice because someone can go back if they weren't able to make a meeting. And I've done this myself where I haven't been able to make a meeting, but I can go back and listen to the audio later while I'm, doing dishes or something. But yes, so you're doing lots of Zoom calls?
Doing lots of Zoom calls. I'm also, getting out and about throughout the state, meeting with various elected officials. Almost every time we meet outside, we're 6 feet apart.
Thankfully, the weather is pretty decent right now.
The weather's been marvelous right now, and I'm putting a lot of miles on my car. Actually, the car I have is closing in on almost 400,000 miles. Oh
my gosh! What kind of car do you drive?
It's a 1991 Buick LeSabre.
Wow!
And I joke about it that I've aged in. My demographic has aged into the car.
Yeah. Oh my gosh! And this weekend, we were talking about 4th of July before we went on the air, and you mentioned that you had gone. You were kind of a little bit all over the place. Were you doing that for personal reasons, or were you going to talk to people, or what was that?
I was out and about, both in the eastern Oregon and southern Oregon. First, I always enjoy it. It's such a beautiful state that we live in, all parts of it. And although I've lived here all my life, I never cease to be amazed by what a wonderful state that we are fortunate enough to live in. But no, I was meeting with mayors throughout the state this last weekend. And as you said, is my website, I've been very fortunate to get the endorsements of mayors from all over the state to say that, yes, Jeff, you're the one who needs to be the next treasurer of the state. And this is both Republican and Democratic Democrats who are mayors in our state. And I'm very pleased with that responsiveness where they say, the treasurer's position is about bringing the technical skills that are needed. It's not about the politics of it, although politics always enter. And Jeff, you've got the greater set of technical skills, financial skills, and experience to be the next treasurer of Oregon.
It's really interesting because I was looking at your list of mayors that do endorse you. And I actually I did not realize that the mayor of Sandy, I went to high school with him.
Oh, goodness.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I know Stan Pulliam. That's crazy. Yeah, it was very, I did not realize. I mean, I obviously don't live there. I only lived there for a couple of years for high school, but I don't live there anymore, so I don't really keep up on their politics. But yeah, that was kind of a cool thing.
Marvelous. Well, and here's something just that you brought up on Sandy. Both Stan Pulliam and the previous mayor, Bill King, and Stan and Bill ran against each other in 2018, yet they have both endorsed me.
Yeah, that's great.
It is.
I'm curious, I'm sure you've followed it somewhat. Can you speak a little bit on, I'm hesitant to use the word fiasco, but that's the only word that's coming to me, the Department of Forestry and their budgetary issues. Do you feel comfortable talking about that? Like, do you know enough about it?
I know what I have read in the paper.
Yeah.
I have a couple of general thoughts.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Yeah. Again, not knowing all of the details and not being involved in it it's really hard to speak completely about it. But I'm sure you have some general thoughts.
I do, and one of them it goes to a general approach is, and again, this is a comment about our current treasurer. He serves as the chair of a couple of boards in the state. One is the Oregon Saves, the retirement program, and the other one is the 529, the educational saving program. And I've been attending those or listening to those since coronavirus hit. And they present all sorts of information, but they never present a basic set of financial documents, an income statement, and a balance sheet. Well, that's finance one.
Right.
And
I am not. I took very basic like accounting classes in
Yes.
college, and I know that that's kind of where you start.
That's your starting point.
Yeah.
I mean, they present other information at those meetings, but they don't present the basics. So you don't know overall and then start drilling down. That's number one. Number two, the Department of Forestry had to go to and borrow money internally from the Treasurer's office, the Treasury Department, and that's the same thing as what happens when you go to a bank to borrow money, if you're a company or an individual.
Sure.
Well, when that happens, the bank says, here are certain conditions. It's just we don't give you a check and, okay, maybe if you can pay us back, you do. What were the conditions? I read about no conditions that were being, developed for the Department of Forestry going forward. Now, the Department of Forestry got dealt a bad hand with the increase in the number of forest fires, and they had to devote resources they didn't have and that weren't in their budget. So I understand that the problem is, but this should not have come as a surprise to anybody. And that goes to informing the public, letting people know what's going on. And the worst part for me was not that it happened, although that was very unfortunate, but it appeared to come as a surprise out of the blue. That comes from reading basic financial statements that people should have been aware of and on top of.
Yeah, I think Betsy has expressed the same. Senator Betsy Johnson has expressed the same sentiments that she's a little, because obviously with the budget, with the Ways and Means Committee, she's involved in that sense. I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about your platform, about talking about audit functions? Because I think this is a very interesting topic and kind of actually goes into a little bit of, kind of touches on the forestry issue, what you believe the audit functions should do as part of the Treasurer's office?
Certainly. The audit function is in the Secretary of State's office. And so the Treasurer can request to the Secretary of State, the Audit Department, or through the Secretary of State to the Audit Division, that they would like to have an audit performed in a particular area, not only inside the Treasurer's office, but in other areas where they think they might have a concern. But the final call for that is through the Secretary of State's office. So it's one of those where, as a treasurer, I could offer suggestions, but I could not mandate and say, I want you to do an audit, and you must do an audit in this particular area. But audits are incredibly important because when they're done correctly, and the auditing profession has professional standards, an audit is prepared. Before it is released, the audit is sent to a particular division, a particular company, for them to provide an opportunity to respond, to say, here's a criticism, here's a correction, and say, here's what they think about it. And then the audit department then goes back, makes final adjustments to the report, and releases it, and you go forward. But one of the things that I can do, and I've referred to it as your treasurer, the Secretary of State's office did the audit of the purchasing processes of the state. Since that report came out, it's been crickets. I've heard nothing about the progress made on the audit. As the treasurer, I could go take that report and say, here's an opportunity for saving money, here's the status of it, what's going on, what's the status? And I can use the platform and the pulpit of the Treasurer's office to bring attention to the corrections that are being made. It's also one of those things, I mean, I happen to get excited about improving processes to save money.
Sure.
That's not high on the list of most people. But that's the background that I will bring to bear serving as our next treasurer.
I also think it's interesting, one of the things you mentioned on your website is restoring the treasurer's website to give the standard citizens access to information that maybe isn't accessible right now. Yes,
not all the information to try and see what's going on with the Treasurer's office financially is always there on a readily timely basis. And as an example, recently of something that came up, and again I go pretty wonky here, but the Oregon Investment Council recently changed its policy assumptions with respect to projected rate of earnings on fixed income on debt.
Mm-hmm.
That, and it won't take effect until a couple of years from now. It's a very small change, but it's going to have a big impact on the public employee retirement system.
Sure.
And that's the sort of thing that should be being talked about now so we can start to prepare for it. Because going forward, come 2023-25, in that biennium, this change, very small change on one of the assumptions that the Investment Council is making on PERS and the earnings can have a huge impact on what every city, county, and state has to pay in, and that has an impact on services.
Mm-hmm.
Now, although it's the PERS board which has the final say, the Investment Council provides input for that.
Mm-hmm.
It should be advertised, and advertised is not the right word. We need to inform the public that, hey, this is coming, and we need to talk about it as to its impact.
Mm-hmm. We just have a few minutes left. I want to give you an opportunity to let folks know if they want to get involved or how they get more information. Can you kind of run down that list of contact and I don't know if you're planning on being anywhere nearby sometime soon?
I have been in Tillamook, not in the last month or so. The best way to get to me is go to my website at www.jeffgudman.org. They can learn about me. They can make a contribution. They can, or if somebody wants to call me, my phone number is there. And may I give you my phone number?
Sure, go for it.
It's 503-780-1524. And if somebody calls me, I do my best to get back to them. If I can't pick up, I get back to them as soon as I can, and we will have a wonderful conversation.
Great. Is there anything else you want to mention just in general, a little last-minute plug for yourself or something you want to point out or have somebody go look at?
Thank you for this opportunity, and also thank you for what you do for the community with your program.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think I'd like to close with some language that I had in a recent opinion piece that was published in different newspapers throughout the state. It's that Oregonians are capable of understanding and weighing the risks associated with the coronavirus. Mm-hmm. They also unequivocally support substantial continued preventative measures that serve the members of our population most at risk. And vague but politically unassailable mantras from our treasurer like, "We will get through this," are not helpful. Mm-hmm. That the calculation in developing policies that balances our lives and livelihoods is challenging. An effective leader combines heart, humility, and hard evidence while continuing to inform and engage the public. And Mr. Reed's silence and inaction is inexcusable. It's time for a new treasurer in Oregon.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see, just a few reminders for everyone. Don't forget I think everybody kind of knows by now, but last Wednesday, Oregon, the face covering guidelines have been expanded to the entire state of Oregon. Masks are required in all businesses, including grocery stores, gyms, pharmacies, public transit, salons, barbershops, restaurants, retail stores, and shopping malls, and in ride shares. Children under the age of 12 and people with medical conditions or disabilities that make it difficult to wear a mask are exempt from the requirement. According to the state guidelines, face covering means a cloth, paper, or disposable barrier that covers the nose and mouth. As a reminder, the Tillamook Chamber does have face masks available that the Tillamook Creamery made. Thank you very much to them. They are free, and the Chamber is located at 208 Main Avenue. This Friday is a sip and shop. It's been gone for a while, but you can join downtown merchants for a special evening on Friday, July 10th. Each of the businesses participating will be sharing tastes of their favorite adult beverage and hosting a variety of sales and special offers. There is no cost or registration associated, just an invitation to go downtown, relax, and be social. The July Sip and Shop hosts include West Elliott Boutique, which is across on Main Street across from Food Roots, Madeline's Vintage Marketplace, Salty Raven, and Recurrent. They are looking forward to Sip and Shop every month and are excited to have everyone join them the second Friday to explore all that downtown has to offer, and that is from 5 to 7 on Friday night. Just a reminder about our farmers markets. Manzanita's Farmers Market has online pre-order sales Sunday through Thursday with drive-through order pickup on Friday. You can get more info at manzanitafarmersmarket.com. Nescoen's Farmers Market is Saturday from 9 to 1 at the Nescoen Valley School. Tillamook Farmers Market is Saturday from 9 to 2 on Laurel Avenue. Pacific City's Farmers Market is Sunday from 10 to 2 at the South County Library. Jeff, thanks for calling in this morning.
Thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to future conversations.
Absolutely. And thank you, Tillamook, for listening.